Please, if you want more food, feel free to grab it. We're going to get started on at least starting to get into the text a little bit because I haven't done this in a couple of months, and I think I was a little more ambitious with the amount of text I brought than we'll actually have time for. But I'd love to at least get through a few of the commentaries I brought in. So this week, we're reading Matot Maseh, double Parsha, not split up this year. And I want to focus on something, actually, the beginning of the second half of the Parsha, and the ideas that come out in that second half. So for the sake of the Zoom crowd, I'll go ahead and read the text. But there's a microphone around, so feel free to use the microphone when we're going back and forth on the discussion portion of it. So the second half of the Parsha starts out. These were the marches of the Israelites who started out from the land of Egypt, troop by troop, in the charge of Moses and Aaron. And what follows is a recounting of where they march from, and then where they encamp, and then onwards and onwards along the way. There's brief interludes here and there with a word about what happened in certain places, but generally speaking, it's they went from here to here. They went from here to here. And that's what comes in at this Parsha, which is, if it's by itself, or even if it's a double Parsha, the end of the book of Numbers. So this upcoming week at Shabbat services, we'll be saying Chazak Chazak for completing the book of Bamidbar and going into the last book of Torah. So I want to just start from that point without going into any of the commentaries. What might the value be in recounting the journey that's already taken place?
It's maybe good to know where you were and where you are.
So it's good to know where you were and where you are, just like from a sense of, okay, this is the path that we traveled.
Are you talking about any journey that we take, or are you talking about a specific journey?
I'm not talking about I'm not talking about this journey in particular. I'm just saying in general, what's the value of recounting a journey after you've undertaken it?
I do it. You want to know, was it worth it after all? Would you do it again? Did you learn something? Did it enhance you in any way, or did it not leave any impression on you at all? What did you get out of it? Did you experience something for the first time, or was it all like deja vu? Did it make you a better person because you went on the journey? There's all kinds of questions to ask after you've gone through a journey, a whole lot of questions. Would you do it again? Was it worth the cost? Was it worth the aggravation?
Great.
Yeah. All
So
those things are worth asking.
So it's worth asking all sorts of different questions afterwards. Was there value in it? What did you get out of it? Would you do it again? Things like that. Yeah.
She said far more eloquently than I would have said. I agree.
Oh, okay. And I didn't repeat it nearly as eloquently as it was said. But yeah, there's all sorts of different things we can look back at a journey and learn from the journey. Taking lessons from the past and using them in future journeys. Yeah.
And I'm wondering also if part of this is like staking a claim.
Staking a claim.
Right. Like recounting how we got from X to Y. I mean, what's the context of this, right? What came before, what came after? Talking about the desert, Israel, like staking our claim.
Our claim on. Okay. Yeah, so the whole journey helps to stake a narrative claim at the very least, if not more than that, on the land of Israel. That's where we're headed. And now we have like the receipts to show that this is where we ended up. Okay.
The receipts also show for anyone who's doubting that the whole project never happened. That's really, it's existential. It shows it existed.
Mm-hmm.
Or to say, well, this never happened, that never happened, that miracle never happened, or, when you're saying, I went here, went here, went here, went here, it's like recounting the journey.
Okay, but I have.
Yeah.
to ask
So, yeah. So just so recap for people who are listening in, that recounting a journey is
Proving that you're doing it.
it's proof that it actually happened to a certain extent.
Well, another thing is sometimes a journey can mark a passage of time, like, you remember the first time you saw Mount Sinai, or the first time you saw Paris, or, it can mark the passage of time as well. But, I mean, the synagogue, we just went on a journey, we went on a journey in May, we came back in May. And yeah, like tomorrow we're having a get together. And I don't know what we're gonna discuss, if we're gonna discuss the memories of it, or did it in any way change you? Did it enhance your understanding of things? All those things. If a journey's not, if you didn't get anything out of it, then why go back? Why do it again? Because journeys, they're not easy. It's not easy to do a journey. It's expensive. It takes a certain
Yeah.
degree of aggravation and inconvenience, and it disrupts your
Yeah.
life. And
Journeys
if you
are.
didn't get anything out of it, then why go through it again?
Mm-hmm.
That kind of stuff.
Yeah. Journeys are a lot, and there's value in looking back at the value of them. Contemporaneous documentation. Yeah. Having a sense of what happened as it happened, because that's going to be the most accurate portrayal of what happened. Our memories start to slowly cloud over time, and it may not be the most accurate portrayal. There's a lot of things that can become a little bit rosier over time. There's a lot of things that can, on the other hand, just kind of seep in and be viewed in a more negative light as life progresses.
It shows resilience also.
Resilience. Okay.
We went through that journey when we have exile or other problems. We do that because we had a march 30 years ago. We just did another one because we had the history of building that. We did that march 30 years ago. I'm talking about like last year.
Yeah.
24 days, 350 months.
Yeah.
A journey.
Yeah. There's for sure. AJ. That's a great point, AJ. The idea that this isn't just a journey of the people who started it, it's also a journey of the people who were born along the way who may not know the entire journey. And so it's recounting to them that journey as they're on the eve of going into the land of Israel, which will mean that I'm going to bypass that second question there, because we've kind of already answered that as well. Why this section would be at the end of Bamidbar instead of Dvarim, because now in Dvarim, Moshe is going to do his piece, but before that, we need to kind of come together as a community and reflect before the leader has the final word. So I'm gonna continue on so that we can try and get through at least a couple of these texts. Rashi has a commentary on. There's quite a few commentaries on this. The commentators go nuts for these very open-ended places to ask questions, and they're quite lengthy. So Rashi says, why are these stations recorded here? In order to make known the loving acts of the omnipresent, that although God had decreed against them to make them move about and wander in the wilderness, you should not think that they wandered and moved about without cessation from one station to another station all the 40 years, and that they had no rest. For you see that there are Here, only 42 stages. Deduct from them 14, all of which were their stopping places in the first year after they left Egypt, before the decree was made, from the time when they journeyed from Ramses until they came to Rithmah, whence the spies were sent out, as it is said, and then he's going to give proof that this happened where it did. Um, so you learn, further deduct from them the 8 stages, I'm at the dash, further deduct from them the 8 stages which were after Aaron's death, those from Mount Hor to the plains of Moab in the 40th year. It follows that during the whole of the 38 years, they made only 20 journeys. This is excerpted from the work of Rabbi Moses the preacher. Rabbi Tanhuma gave another explanation of it here, of why these stages are recorded here. There's a parable. It may be compared to the case of a king whose son was ill and whom he took to a distant place to cure him. When they returned home, the father began to enumerate all the stages, saying to him, "Here we slept, here we caught cold, here you had a headache," etc. And this is from the Midrash. So to summarize this, why is Rashi saying that the journeys are recounted in Rashi's words? To figure out what took them so long? Not exactly. He's actually saying that that it didn't need to, that it that yeah, right. So he has an interesting read on it. Yeah, it is, to a certain extent, it is what Rashi's saying, that it didn't need to take them so long. It went at a slower pace than it needed to. But there's a little point in there that Rashi's trying to make about why it took so long if it didn't need to take so long.
We wanted to give time for the generation to die out.
But that's not what Rashi's saying here. Yes, that is practically the reason why it's happening, is in part because God decides after the incident with the spies that there needs to be a new generation to go into the land, that the current generation isn't ready for it. But Rashi's saying something a little bit different. The parable, why, like, why would he bring that? Okay.
I'm not sure if that's the same thing, but I think when we count everything we have done, it's more precise, it makes a point. And regardless of all this, because maybe Rashi knows also people's mentality, after all we have, there are people who deny it. So as much as we can have documents, that makes it more educated.
Yeah, the precision's important, but that's not quite the point. Rashi, it's on that first page. That is like the crux of his argument, and then he makes the argument, and he tries to prove the point again with the end. But what he's saying in the beginning is that that God is doing this slowly so that the people don't have to exert themselves constantly, so that it's not like this hurried hike through the desert, that it's a nice relaxed pace. And in that sense, God was actually taking care of them. And then at the end, why do we have this retelling of it? It's because God wants the people to know that even in these moments where, looking back, oh yeah, God got angry here, God was still looking out for them the entire time, that God was trying to do these loving acts. And that's what the Midrash is trying. It's not like the most straightforward. I'll grant you all that, because I see the looks. But the point is that it's like a parent, it's like a parent saying, I did all these things for you because I care about you. Yeah, kind of. It's kind of like doing all those things. It's more along the lines of, yeah, if you look at all the times that you were asked, how much longer, 5 more minutes, how much longer, 5 more minutes, the journey can seem like it took forever. But if you look back at all those little memories along the way that were happy memories, then you realize that, and you also see where the journey was taking you, then you see that there was an attempt the entire way to show love, even as it was difficult.
So I kind of get that, but that's where the parable at the end has been caught up. Because the parable at the end is just the king's taking his retreat, right? And so you would think he's like, oh, here's where we got the milkshake. Here's where we played license plate game. Here's where we saw a cow on the side of the road. But no, he's like, here's where we slept. Here's where you caught a cold. Here's where you had a headache. Like he's telling them all these terrible things that happen along the way.
No, they're not terrible things. They're not terrible things. Those things are part of life. I mean, they're part of life. Let's just say when something is done slowly over a long period of time, he mentioned stages. You go through stages of development as opposed to what, when you, it's like if you take a jet as opposed to if you, let's say you fly from here to Massachusetts or you drive. We're talking about stages. We're talking about, yeah, this is where you slept. This is, okay,
Right.
you caught a cold here, but those are stages. They're not necessarily terrible things. And
So how do those show God's love? How does stages, how does even the bad things in life, how do those show God's love?
I didn't hear your question.
Okay, so you're saying there's stages in life,
Yeah,
right?
stages.
And Rashi's point, he starts out saying that he wants, that it's the way to show God's love, God's caring for the Jewish people as they're going through this journey.
Okay,
So my question to you is how do these stages in the parable, the stages with all the negativity, you got a headache, you got a cold,
Yeah.
how do those show God's love?
First of all, you got to be trained to handle it as you got to be trained to handle those things, okay? Because sometimes there's going to be
We all know
hardships
there's
along the way.
adversity in life.
So,
yes, but
okay, you caught a cold. Were you able to handle it? Did you learn how to take care of yourself because of it? What did you get out of it? That kind of stuff. Maybe it's training. Maybe you're learning how to take care of yourself. Maybe you're learning a whole new set of behaviors that's going to help you.
I don't disagree. I'm just not sure that's what Rashi is saying. I'm not sure what he's saying.
Fair, it's not the yeah. It is not the clearest Rashi, I will grant y'all that. But there's a sense that, like, look back at all these things that happened, and your Avinu Shabbat was with us this entire time. That's, I think, kind of the crux of what he's getting at. I want to move on, just being mindful of time. And I'm going to skip Sforno, but I'll summarize really briefly that even though he's the shortest text I brought, that it's in order to complement the Jewish people who had blindly followed God. So look at all these things that they did in blind faith for God. That's why it's recounted word for word, and the Torah is being so verbose here. It's every single act of blind faith that God was going to bring them to the right place at the end is something that deserves a reward in and of itself. The next text is quite long, and at the same point, I think it's really going to bring an interesting read on all this. So it's split into two parts. That's why we're going to break in the middle of it. So we're catching him halfway in, and he's explaining, because like I said, very verbose, but he's explaining why it is that it begins with, that the verse begins, Eile Maaseh B'nai Yisrael, these were the marches, using this logic that the word Eila is always used the same way. But here he's going to focus on a different word. We also need to emphasize why the Torah chose to emphasize, we also need to explore why the Torah chose to emphasize the journeys, i.e. the Israelites breaking camp, rather than to emphasize that they made camp, i.e. that they arrived at a destination. The question is especially relevant in view of Tanchuma on our verse, which describes the situation in terms of the parable, which is the one that Rashi brought. So we're going to skip down to, although I will say it's told differently. Yes.
But it makes more sense.
Okay. So I'll go through the telling if you think it makes more sense. A king had a son who was sick, so he took him to one health spa after another. When the son had finally been cured and the father took him back home, the father would reminisce with him about all the various places they had been together prior to the last one where the son had been cured. If the Midrash correctly summarized the reason why the Torah lists all these journeys, it would surely have been more appropriate to list the places where they stopped over, i.e., the arrivals. We also have yet another Tanchuma, which claims the reason the Torah lists all these journeys is so that the desert which hosted the Jewish people during this period would receive its appropriate reward in the future, as alluded to by Isaiah 35:1. The arid desert shall be glad, the wilderness shall rejoice. This midrash too would make better sense if the Torah had concentrated on describing the times spent by the Jewish people camping in the desert, rather than the occasions when they broke camp. So real quickly, just to summarize, and then we're going to continue on. What's Orach Chaim's difficulty with the use of the word journeys and the way that this verse is being set up? What's his problem that he's then going to solve in the next part? Great. The emphasis in this is that they left and not that they arrived someplace. So I'm going to continue on. Yeah. Well, that we're emphasizing the fact that they went on the journey and not that they actually got to the destination. So that comes out in the way that it's in the use of the idea of journeys, that they left the camp. We're going to continue on, and just stay with me because it's going to get a little something. Yeah, Zohar. It's going to get a little Kabbalistic. Our verse may be understood when we consider what the Zohar has to say about the purpose of the Israelites' trek through the desert. It was meant to enable the Israelites to seek out isolated sparks of sanctity and to release them from captivity. These sparks had been taken captive by the spiritually negative forces who have made their home in the desert. God made the Israelites travel through such places in order that their sanctity would act as a magnet and attract such lost sparks of sanctity. The only way this could be accomplished was by means of total sanctity, i.e., a combination of the sanctity of Israel, the presence of God, Shekhinah, and the Holy Torah. It required the presence of 600,000 souls, which originated in holy domains. Moses matched these 600 individually holy souls, as he is perceived as the tree from which all these souls are branches. In a combined effort, these forces of sanctity were able to overcome the forces of impurity, which kept many of the lost sparks of sanctity captive. According to the Zohar, then, these sparks could be captured while the Israelites were actively journeying, not while they were passively encamped. And it is this that the Torah has in mind when writing, "These are the journeys." The word Elah is indeed in sharp contrast to any other journeys ever described anywhere, as never before had there been a journey which was accompanied by so many elements of sanctity. So according to the Orach Chaim, why are the journeys being recounted then?
It's the journey, not the destination.
It's the journey, not the destination. Yeah, great. What lesson comes out of that then?
Oh, I got a big lesson out of that.
Yeah.
As you asked, but I'm gonna let someone else talk. The bakers, I'll give you a good lesson. The lesson is applied to the work that I do. We've been fighting for 60 years to improve the conditions of the farm workers. What I learned from Cesar Chavez, the reason why workers trust us is because we're keep fighting with that workers. Not that we want, but we're there. So it's God who was with us on the journey. That's the lesson. Applied to the farm.
So the lesson is that God was with us on the journey, that the journey wasn't being undertaken alone.
Using my own experience of why we're still alive 60 years later, the only organization formed 60 years ago is still alive.
Yeah.
Is there so first of all, I don't think we have enough time to take apart something Kabbalistic
Fair enough. We don't need to necessarily get into the Kabbalistic, but
Is this a good overeat, right? The Zohar is talking about places of negative forces and the sanctity of God eradicating that negativity. Is this an overall lesson about the steps we have to take to replace negativity or evil with goodness?
so Sandra brought up this idea of good versus negativity, we'll call it, and a question of whether or not that's kind of what's coming out of it. I'm going to use the contrast that you're bringing in, but change the language, if that's all right. It's an idea of the ability to bring holiness to places that may be lacking it. The idea, and so all the more so, this idea that in the desert where there's nothing, there is nothing. That even there, the Israelites were able to bring holiness through the correct actions, through, among other things, community, right? It really brings up this idea that they all need to be together to make this happen. If there isn't the community, it doesn't happen. So there is a sense that you need that holiness can be brought through community in any place.
You and Miley Cyrus figured it out.
Yeah. So that was, yeah, we'll get there in a second.
You had to travel through the journey through the desert in order to become a holy people. That the desert had these sparks of sanctity which were says captured if they were sitting in captivity. The experience, the people had to go through all the experiences of the 40 years in the desert in order to become a holy people that they were intended to become. It was a process that the desert provided them with the elements which ultimately created who they are.
Beautiful. So there's the sense that that the people needed to go through the desert to gain the holiness. They're the magnets for holiness. They become holy in the process. But if there isn't the journey, they're just the same people that left Egypt. They're the people who are capable of attaining that holiness, but they haven't yet attained it. And so the journey is really necessary. And that's where, yeah, go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was wondering. So Rashi, he was talking about like they're collecting the experiences that they such.
Yeah.
And here they're collecting sparks. So are they the same thing? The experience of like pennies and sparks here?
Are the experiences and sparks of holiness the same thing? I don't know that they're talking about the same thing in terms of, I think there's an intentional difference in the language they're using, but they are, no, they're not contemporaries. Orach Chaim has access to Rashi. Rashi does not have access to Orach Chaim. But they are talking about something similar, which is why I brought in the last source, which is the most contemporary source and not inherently a Jewish one. There's a sense that regardless of whether you're talking about sparks or experiences, there's something that you gain from journeys that you don't gain from sitting in place. So that's why I brought in this, this last text from Miley Cyrus, The Climb, which I won't sing for everyone's benefit. But every step I'm taking, every move I make feels lost with no direction. My faith is shaking. But I gotta keep trying, gotta keep my head held high. There's always gonna be another mountain. I'm always gonna wanna make it move. Always gonna be an uphill battle. Sometimes I'm gonna have to lose. Ain't about how fast I get there. Ain't about what's waiting on the other side. It's the climb. So I'll close by saying that we're all on many journeys at any point in our life. And my hope is that we're able to reflect back on the journeys that we've already experienced and take something from them to help us on the journeys that we're undertaking. But more than that, that we're able to, in the moment, really be able to appreciate the value of the journey itself and understand that the journey is what really brings us the experience to go on and take on whatever the next journey is. So with that, I'll say Shabbat Shalom.